Set in Spain, the story begins with Judith Flores venting. Judith says she had an ex-boyfriend named Fernando, but while they were dating, Judith always felt the relationship was empty and never really satisfied her. Judith works as an employee at a pharmaceutical company called Muller. A few months ago, Judith almost got promoted to the youngest executive there. But that hope was shattered just like that, whether out of habit or to look good in front of her boss. Every morning, Judith always brings coffee for her boss, Monica. That afternoon, Monica invited Judith to have dinner. But Judith refused because Judith had to finish a report about the troubled Q1 branch. In the end, Monica left with another employee, Miguel.
¿Te animas?
Yo.
After working overtime and finishing the report, Judith placed it on Monica's desk and decided to go home. When she arrived at the parking lot, Judith accidentally overheard Monica and Miguel's voices. It turned out they had a secret relationship. Seeing what they were doing on the hood of the car, Judith got carried away by the mood. Understandably, Judith was single, and everything like that suddenly felt very attractive to her. The next morning, Judith went back to her routine, buying coffee for Monica and squeezing into the elevator with workers from other floors. But this time something was different. Judith met a bearded man. Not long after, the electricity in the building went out. Judith, who has an anxiety disorder, immediately looked restless. Judith started feeling itchy because if she's in a stressful situation for too long, her skin can break out. Hearing that, the mysterious man tried to calm her down and even blew on Judith's neck that felt itchy. Unexpectedly, from that brief encounter, they immediately felt attracted to each other. Judith even gave her phone number to the man. Right at that moment, the elevator door opened, and Judith was shocked when she found out who the man really was. The man was Eric Zimmerman, the son of the company owner, who would later take over the family business after his father passed away.
El nuevo. Pues a mí me vale.
Pues a mí me parece el típico.
After talking briefly with Eric, Judith was called by Monica. Apparently, Eric rejected the restructuring proposal for the Q1 branch that Judith had submitted. So Monica asked Judith to redo her report from beginning.
Las oficinas que no cumplan, que cierres la puerta, Judith.
That night, Judith went home much later than usual because she had to finish the requested report. Monica, who thought Judith had already gone home since the afternoon, continued her activities with Miguel. Not wanting to disturb them, Judith chose to hide and wait until the situation was safe. In the middle of that awkward situation, Eric suddenly appeared and started teasing Judith. Judith tried to keep her distance because the company rules were quite clear. Employees are not allowed to have relationships with bosses or co-workers. But Eric seemed unconcerned about that. Without seeing the situation, Eric immediately offered Judith to have dinner. Eric even stated that tomorrow he would pick Judith up, without giving Judith a chance to refuse. The next day, while Judith was playing with her beloved cat, Eric really came to her house. Eric could find out Judith's address from the company data. Judith initially refused because she still wanted to strictly follow the company rules. However, after thinking about it for a bit, Judith finally gave in and asked Eric to wait for a moment so Judith could get ready. Once they arrived at the restaurant, Judith started feeling more relaxed with Eric, especially since from the beginning, Judith did have an attraction to that man.
Diré que estaba atrapada.
But what happened next immediately changed the mood. Eric invited Judith to go behind the curtain to taste the dessert, but it turned out Eric took her to watch an inappropriate show. Judith was immediately shocked and chose to leave without saying anything. Feeling guilty for leaving Eric just like that, Judith finally sent an apology message that night. The next day, Eric came again, this time bringing a classic car that Judith liked. Eric apologized for what happened last night and admitted he didn't want to force anything that wasn't comfortable for Judith. That attitude made Judith melt, and Judith agreed to spend time with Eric. After walking around while taking dogs from the shelter, Eric invited Judith to his house. There, Eric tried to get closer again. Judith, who already felt more trusting, finally agreed to play with him while her eyes were covered. Judith even allowed Eric to record and replay their video. But But the atmosphere immediately changed when Judith saw another woman appearing in the recording. Feelings of disgust and anger arose instantly.
¡Eres un puto pervertido!
Tiene que ser una sorpresa, porque si te lo decía...
¡Nada de lo que tiene! ¡Nada!
To vent her emotions, Judith went to practice boxing at the gym. While she was hitting the punching bag full of rage, there was a girl who kept watching her. That gaze made Judith start reconsidering what Eric had actually done and how Eric had treated Judith all this time. The next day, Monica and Eric called Judith into their room. Eric wanted Judith to attend a meeting at the Q1 branch office in Barcelona because the report that would be used later was the one Judith had written before. But Judith refused. Judith said her other work was piling up because of the report Eric asked her to revise, so she needed time to finish it.
Sigue teniendo los datos. Para mí es muy importante conocer su...
When she got home, Judith found her cat in a very weak condition. Judith immediately took her cat to the vet. Unfortunately, Judith's cat was declared dead due to old age. Her cat's passing left Judith completely devastated. In the midst of that sadness, Eric appeared at the right time, when Judith needed someone to lean on. Even though she was still angry, Judith asked Eric to keep her company just for that night. The next morning, Eric brought coffee and prepared breakfast for Judith. That gesture made Judith feel a little calmer. Judith then asked if Eric was really serious about inviting her to Barcelona. Eric confirmed that he was serious, because only Judith understood the situation at the Q1 branch well. Judith warned Eric that even if Judith went to Barcelona, it didn't mean Judith was willing to play around. Eric responded casually, saying there were many women who liked him, so Judith wasn't the only one he could have fun with. Eric also emphasized that he didn't want to fall in love or be tied down to one woman. That sentence made Judith a little upset, because secretly Judith hoped Eric had the same feelings as her. Upon arriving at the office, Judith met Eric again. Judith stated that she would go to Barcelona with one condition. They had to sleep in separate rooms. If later Judith was willing to play, Eric had to explain all the rules. During the trip to Barcelona, Eric's phone kept ringing. There was a woman named Betta who kept calling him repeatedly, but Eric chose to ignore it. Once they arrived in Barcelona, Judith felt happy for a moment because the facilities provided were really luxurious. But that good mood immediately collapsed the next morning when Eric came to the meeting location while holding hands with a woman named Amanda, the finance manager of the Q1 branch office. Amanda's presence made Judith feel unappreciated, as if Judith was just an extra brought along with no clear purpose.
Los inversores y mucho tipo más concepto.
While the meeting was going on, Eric kept sending teasing messages to Judith. Judith replied in a curt tone. It didn't take long before Eric stopped the meeting and told everyone to leave except Judith. Eric said he wanted to discuss something important with Judith. Once the room was empty, Judith immediately asked why she was brought to Barcelona if Eric already had Amanda. Eric explained that Amanda was just one of the people who had rejected Judith's report before. Judith emphasized that she didn't want to be in the position of the other woman. Eric just laughed and reminded her that he never wanted a serious relationship because of jealousy and emotion. The argument ended with them playing on the meeting table. From the expressions of Amanda and some other female employees who saw it briefly, Judith became even more convinced that she was not the first woman Eric had invited on this kind of adventure. The deeper Judith entered Eric's world, the more rules and behaviors felt like they crossed moral boundaries. This time, Eric started introducing Judith to another game, even though Judith hadn't fully entered that level yet. But something changed after they spent the night together. Eric suddenly became cold. The next morning, Eric told Judith to go home first and take some time off. Eric said Amanda alone was enough to handle all the branch office matters. The trip home on Eric's private jet felt heavy for Judith. Judith didn't go straight back to Madrid. She stopped by Jerez to meet her father and family. To clear her mind, Judith joined the local festival. There Judith met Fernando, her ex-boyfriend. The two ended up together again, triggered by the empty and gloomy feelings Judith had carried since Barcelona. The next day, after finishing a motorcycle ride, Judith was surprised to see Eric suddenly appear. What was even more surprising, Eric said that he missed Judith. Even though back in Barcelona, he was the one who distanced himself and even used his position to make Judith feel unappreciated.
Porque si has venido hasta aquí,
Even though she was still upset, Judith still invited him to tour the city. Her father, who saw the two of them together, seemed happy too, as if he knew his daughter was falling in love. When Judith and Eric were enjoying the atmosphere of Judith's childhood town, they accidentally met Fernando. As soon as he saw Judith with another man, Fernando immediately showed his jealousy. Fernando felt unacceptable that Judith treated him as if he meant nothing, especially after what happened at the party the night before. However, Judith was firm. Judith said their relationship was already over, and Fernando was just part of the past that didn't need to be repeated. After dealing with her ex who hadn't moved on, Eric invited Judith to his friend's party. But before going there, Eric warned her that the party was full of players, so Judith really had to think about it first. To give Judith time to make a decision, Eric took her to stop by some of his friends' houses first. Before they left, her father asked Eric to take care of Judith. From the way he spoke, it was clear Judith's father saw that the two of them were falling in love with each other.
Ha sido un placer, John Manuel.
Venga, un abrazo, picha. Ven.
On the way, Eric's phone rang again. Betta's name appeared again, but like before, Eric immediately ignored it. This time, Judith started getting curious. Judith stepped on the gas and forced Eric to tell her who Betta really was. Finally, Eric explained that Betta was his ex-girlfriend for 2 years. The relationship ended after Betta was caught cheating with Eric's own father. Since that incident, Eric admitted it was difficult for him to trust love, and he was afraid to have a serious relationship with anyone. The friends they were going to visit were named Frida and Andreas, a couple who were also players like Eric. Frida was a woman who had once appeared in the video with Eric and Judith. Frida and Andreas indeed lived in an open marriage. The longer Judith hung out with them, the deeper Judith got to know that world of play. Judith started feeling comfortable discussing and exchanging strategies with Frida and Andreas. Because of that closeness with Frida too, Judith finally decided to come to Eric's friend's party. There, Eric introduced Judith to his friend named Alex. From there, you can surely guess what happened next. However, after that night, Eric suddenly disappeared. No news, no answering calls, and no messages left at all. Judith realized Eric had left. Most likely, Eric had gone back to Germany, where his family lived. Slowly, Judith began to rebuild her life without Eric. Judith went back to her usual routine. Judith also told Miguel that she already knew about his relationship with Monica, but Miguel didn't need to worry because Judith had no intention of telling anyone about it. Now, Judith prioritized herself more. Judith dared to refuse overtime from Monica because she wanted to go to the gym. There, Judith started building a friendship with the woman who used to often watch her. Judith even invited that woman to spar and gave her some tips. For the first time, Judith felt her life was back under her own control. One day, Monica finally gave Judith a promotion to finance manager. On one hand, Judith felt proud because all her hard work had paid off. But on the other hand, there was an empty feeling inside her because one thing that no position could replace, Eric. Judith called her father just to check on him, but her father immediately knew that his daughter was heartbroken. Just the way Judith spoke already said everything.
hemos hablado de la muerte de mamá.
Igual no hay nada que hablar, mi vida.
¿Y tú?
Until one morning, without any prior signs, Eric reappeared in Judith's life. Not wanting to get dragged into old feelings again, Judith tried to distance herself. However, Eric finally spoke up and admitted that he had fallen in love with Judith. He even said he would stay right there until Judith gave him an answer. Not wanting to become office gossip, Judith asked Eric to settle everything at home, far from other people's eyes. There, Eric began to explain. Eric admitted his mistake for leaving without a single word. He said he went back to Germany to calm himself down and think about his feelings toward Judith. After reflecting for a long time, Eric finally realized one thing. He truly had fallen in love. But the problem wasn't that simple. Judith had already lost her trust. Judith was afraid Eric would change his mind anytime. Her past experiences made Judith easily feel anxious, especially she had to be in a relationship with someone who had once disappeared without news. Eric promised, sincerely, that he wouldn't repeat it again. Eric was determined to change and wanted to prove himself. Slowly, Eric's attitude melted Judith's suspicion. In the end, Judith gave in and accepted Eric as her boyfriend. The next night, Judith invited Eric to play again, just one round. But this time, it was Eric's eyes that had to be covered. Without Eric's knowledge, Judith invited the gym friend she met yesterday to join. Unfortunately, that simple decision became the beginning of the destruction of their relationship. The gym friend that Judith had just met turned out to be Beta. Judith had no idea that the woman was known as Beta, because when they met, the woman used her real name. The name Beta was only a nickname used by certain people. After her relationship with Eric fell apart again, Judith decided to resign from her job. Judith wanted to rearrange her life and try to enjoy her time by doing solo touring. On that trip, Judith began to realize one important thing. Judith didn't want to be trapped in the wrong love anymore. Judith wanted to control her own life, not live under someone else's control, like what happened when she was with Eric.